Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of A Desire to Inspire. Today, I have a customer service expert joining me all the way from the great town of Cleveland, Ohio, Mr. Dave Murray. Thanks for joining me today, bud.
Oh, you're welcome, Manny. Thank you so much for having me.
You got to tell me, what's the feeling like in the city right now after what just happened a few weeks ago in the World Series?
So I think I can speak on behalf of all Cleveland fans that there's really a sense of pride. There's not disappointment. No one really expected this team to make it to Game 7 of the World Series with the injuries they had to overcome and other things they had against them this season. So it was just such a great run. I think people have a lot of pride. And also, people are excited about the future because they're a young ball club, and they got a lot of good years ahead of them.
Great franchise, great series to watch. We talked about it before, tons of energy. And for you, it was probably a little bit more impactful because you spent quite a few years with the Cleveland Indians, right? You were tenured with them, and you spent several years with customer service.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about that history with the ball club.
Sure. So I spent 12 years total with the Indians. I was there 2 different stints. I was there in the 90s when the team was fantastic and perennial playoff runs. I was there for the 97 World Series, so the last time the team was in the World Series, coincidentally another Game 7 extra inning loss. But back in that role, I was working more with our corporate partners and learned so much and got to work with great organizations that were sponsoring the ball club. Then I left. I moved on. I did, anyone who works in sports really knows there's not a lot of movement sometimes. So if you really want a promotion, sometimes you got to make your own promotion by going somewhere else. So I kind of did that. I spent some time with the Boston Bruins, another great organization. And then I had a chance to come back to the Indians in 2004. And in that role, that was really a customer-facing role. It was kind of a new department that they were launching called Fan Services. And it was focused on everything from our biggest stakeholders, our suite holders, our season ticket holders, but also just the fan that came to one game and had a question about how do I buy tickets, where do I park? So it was a full-service customer department that had an inbound phone room, but then also we had some people out in the ballpark for helping with the experience when people came to the ballpark. So I did that for about 9 years and loved it. We grew that department. When I first started there, I think we had 6 people working there. We grew it to about 30 people at the height of the season and really changed the way the ball club focused on the customer. So I'm really proud of what we did there.
Right. What an exciting experience too, right? I mean, you get the chance to build a team, you get to watch a team, and you completely entertain the whole time. I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of benefits that come along with that, right?
Yeah, and it was so educational. And one of my favorite things about that job is I was typically hiring younger professionals, typically young men and women right out of college. Job didn't pay all that much. A lot of entry-level sports positions do not, as you know. And so they were kind of looking for their shot to get in and grow. And the thing I loved about that job was I really felt like that was my primary responsibility. Yes, we had to service the customers and make sure that we gave the customers a great experience. But I felt my primary role was helping young professionals find what they wanted to do and grow within the organization. And we had such success doing that. And that really gave me a lot of joy in that role. But, growing that department and being involved in some of the things we did to help that organization increase the fan experience was really a lot of fun. Very rewarding.
Absolutely. I want to get back to that point that you just made about getting the young professionals and helping them grow. But because you've been in this business for 20 plus years now, what made you want to get started on this career path? And why was it customer service that kind of stuck out to you and said, hey, come with me, come this way, come this way?
Well, the interesting thing was how I got into sports originally was really more of a class decision. I was at the University of Dayton. I graduated college in 1992. And back in those days, sports management wasn't as big as it is now. Today, most schools have that program. Back then, the schools that were really well known for it, UMass, Ohio University, and some others had their programs, but it was really just starting to come about in a lot of schools. I was torn. I was undeclared. I was a sophomore. I was torn between, do I want to be in the College of Business or do I want to be in the College of Communication? And there were classes I wanted to do in both. I couldn't decide. I literally stumbled across this new major, sports management, that really, to me, had the best of both worlds when it came to class choices. So I jumped on it, really enjoyed my classes. My grades shot up because I was taking classes that I enjoyed. And then I got lucky. I was able to work in my major my entire career. The interesting thing that happened next, where I got to where I am now, where I'm doing customer service consulting, was when I was at the Indians, we hired a gentleman by the name of John DeJulius, who is now my boss. We hired him in 2008 to come in and help us improve our service. We knew we needed some outside resources. We needed some help. Wasn't necessarily in our wheelhouse on how to really systematize things. So we called John, who's a local guy, and he came in and he helped us. So I got to be a client of the DeJulius Group for almost 5 years while I was at the Cleveland Indians, and sitting through a lot of the workshops that I now I conduct, now that I facilitate. So I got to be a client for about 5 years. And so almost 4 years ago now, when John and I had a conversation that the DeJulius Group was growing, they needed some help, and he said, "Are you be interested?" I said, "Absolutely." It seemed like the right choice at the time, and it was for sure.
So what made you want to take the jump? You were there, you were cruising along, you had a great position. What was the conversation like between you and John, and you ultimately were like, "Yeah, I've got to do this"? Was it you wanted some next step of growth, your personal life, career life? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. So a couple of things were happening to me at that time. So my roles were expanding at the Indians. I was doing more. I was doing a lot more facilitation. I was doing a lot more speaking. So I was facilitating some fan focus groups that we were doing on a monthly basis during the season. I was on some committees within the organization and doing a lot of presenting internally to the entire organization. And that was kind of new to me, to be presenting in front of large groups and then be facilitating smaller meetings. And I found that I liked it. So knowing what John did and sitting through some of his workshops, it seemed like a natural progression. It seemed like the next phase of my career where I wanted to go. One of the things that I love about my job so much right now is, I loved working for the Indians. It was a great organization. I loved helping them grow. But one of the things I truly appreciate about my job now is the fact that I get to work with so many organizations and so many cultures. And yesterday I was in Louisiana working with an organization that's a longtime client of ours. And the week before that, I was in Indianapolis with a new client. And so for 2 days, I get to go and kind of dive in organizational cultures and learn what they're doing. And it only helps me grow. And then I can share that with other companies too. So I really love the diversity of companies I get to work with now.
What is the biggest challenge in working with some of these companies now? Obviously, you've got large groups that you work with. I see here you've done some stuff with Anytime Fitness, Carnival Cruise. What's the difficulty in dealing with some of those existing infrastructures?
So I think the biggest challenge for us is really getting in there and learning their culture, so that when we go in and start delivering what we deliver, that it's fitting into their culture. And the last thing we want to do as consultants is come in and give the impression that we think you're doing things wrong and we have the better way to do things. Right. That's not what we're all about. We know that we have tools and some systems that will help you take what you already have and make it better, and also add some new tools to your toolbox. So we really have to get in there and learn their culture, learn how they operate, and learn how to deliver our thing so it fits into their culture. That's probably the biggest challenge, because every culture is obviously very different.
Right. So how do you evaluate that? What's the process that is undertaken when you guys roll into a new company and you start to divulge a bunch of the information that the DeJulius Group is here for? Can you kind of walk me through that a little bit so we understand?
Sure. So the first thing that we do with a new client engagement, we call a discovery day. Okay. And it's really us going on site for a day, sometimes two. Sometimes if they're a multi-unit, sometimes we're in different locations. And it's really us trying to learn as much about their business, as much about how they operate as possible. So it's learning things like what they already have in place, what's important to them as far as if they have core values and if they talk about them, if they have mission statements and they talk about them, or if they have them and they're more just like artwork on the wall, which happens at a lot of organizations too. And also learning things about how they currently train, what's important during their training. Is a lot of organizations have some training, but there's a lot more out there that you just sit with an employee and you do what they do, and that's your training. And we hope that, by you sitting with Bob, you learn some good stuff, because Bob's our best. Right. And they really don't know for sure what that person's learning or what consistencies they have out there. So it's really just us getting a really good understanding of how they operate as an organization, what's important to them, how they communicate. Are they doing daily huddles? Are they heavily relying on email? All those sorts of things, so that we can do our best to fit within their culture. So that discovery day is usually really important for us if we're going to be working with a client, especially for a long term.
So because you're dealing with groups, how do you infiltrate the psyche of the individual? I mean, is there a kind of a mindset practice that goes along with that too? Because customer service, it barrels down to, the individual at some point, right? Obviously you're working with groups here, but how is the approach with really getting this to stick in people's minds?
Great question. So a couple of things we do there. First of all, our workshops, we never come in and really tell people what to do. We have some best practices that we share that other clients of ours have put into place and have had great success. So we're willing to share all the best practices out there, but we don't come in here and say, you need to do this and here's what it needs to look like. Our workshops are really facilitated so that our clients are getting a group of employees together, and we have different types of employees that we want for different types of workshops that we're doing. But it's really them. When I go in to facilitate, I'm facilitating them creating the tools. So at the end of the day, I always say, when people ask me my input, I always say, hey, I'm going back on a flight to Cleveland tonight. So my opinion doesn't matter all that much. So it's your opinion, and you guys are the ones that are going to have to live with it and love it. So it's got to come from you. So I think that's one of the things where we start that's really great is everything we do, it's them creating it. We help them get there, but it's their creation. Right. It's written or created within their culture with words that are important to them, because we take all that into account, what's really important to their organization. So that's where it starts. That's important that they create it themselves. It's not us coming in and like a marketing company and saying, this should be your new slogan. Right. Then secondly, what's really important is we typically do some train the trainers, because we know that, and everyone's heard this before, what gets measured, I should say, gets managed, right? So we know that no matter how big you are, how small you are, middle management is so important. If I go back to my desk and I heard John DeJulius or Dave Murray speak and I was all pumped up about service, then I go back to my cubicle and a week later it's completely forgotten. My boss never talks about it again. Well, I'm going to forget about it too, even though I liked it. So we know how important it is that it really needs to be part of the conversation, needs to be part of your culture on an ongoing basis. So because of that, to really get it to stick, we know that there are some tools that we can help put in place. And again, it varies on culture. It varies if everyone's in one office. If you have multi-unit, sometimes it looks different, or it's conference calls, whatever works for each organization. But really focusing on making sure that this is a topic of conversation, and that people are, when we roll out these new standards that we want people to execute, that they're being coached, they're being held accountable, they're being praised when they do it, and they're being coached when they're not, so that they know how we want to operate. And then it's really incumbent upon those managers or directors, whoever they are, to make sure that it becomes part of the culture, to make sure that people are accountable.
So let me ask you this question. If you were talking to an individual, what advice would you have for them to thrive as a customer service representative, employee, or whatever they call themselves, in their workplace? How would you talk to them about really doing above and beyond work and going the extra mile to make ultimately the customers happy and for themselves as well? I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of fulfillment that comes from that simultaneously.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to a frontline person, someone who is going to be on the phones or standing at the counter dealing with customers on a regular basis, the first piece of advice I would give them is to truly focus on being in the moment. Look to connect, not just communicate, look to connect, because the deck is really stacked against them with all the things that we have out there as organizations to try and be more efficient, call times in call centers and average length of call and average answer speed. A lot of the metrics that were viewed as really important 5-10 years ago, and by a lot of organizations still important today, are really anti-service. If we're living up to some of those metrics, we're probably not providing great service. Right. And it teaches our folks over time to become very transactional, right? They just start to think, I got to work down my checklist. I got to get you off the phone. I got to get to my next call. There's calls and queues, whatever it is. So we know that there's there's standards and systems out there that work against service. So my first piece of advice was look to connect every opportunity you have. Realize that, and I used to tell this to my employees at the Indians all the time that worked in our inbound contact center. This was so important. I reminded them that, you know what, when people call you, it may be their only contact with the ball club. You know, they may love this team. They've been watching it since they were young and they've seen it on TV, but they've never actually interacted with anyone in the ball club. And you may be the first person they've interacted with. And you have to remember, that's a burden. You have to remember that, and you have to make it great. And so, you know, I think that when it comes to service, a lot of people need to be thinking more along those lines. And we, as managers and as organizations, we have to make it easier for our folks to do that. We have to pull back on some of those other metrics and some of the other things that we used to measure or thought were important, that when it comes to building relationships, they're really not. And at the end of the day, the relationships are what's important.
Do you think that customer service is everything for any business that exists? I mean, if you're talking, you know, the mom and pops all the way up to the monopolies, the largest corporations, is service the most important thing across any industry and for any business, so to say?
Well, I'm a little biased, but I would say yes.
Right.
And you look at some companies that have built great organizations, great brands, continue to grow, and a lot of them focus on service. You look at Richard Branson and what he's built with Virgin, and it's all built on service. If you look at Amazon and what they've grown to, and one of my favorite quotes about service comes from Jeff Bezos, where he says, if we have to sit in a room and obsess over what our competition is doing or obsess over our customer experience, we'll pick our customer experience every time. We'll pick what we can control. We can't control the other guy. And look what they've done. Look how they've grown, because their biggest concern is the experience they are providing their customer and how they can improve it.
Right.
And so I really think if more organizations focused on that, service would be in a better place right now across the board.
You've mentioned two companies that really outdo everybody else, Virgin and Amazon, each in their respective space. So let me ask you this question. What makes a company a good service provider versus a great service provider? What are the differences in between that gap?
So the first thing we say is it has to start at the top. And the two companies I mentioned, Virgin, Amazon, and there's some other great examples, Apple when Steve Jobs was there, and they're still like it today, Starbucks, the service mentality starts at the top, and it's a ripple effect from there. So if organizations out there really see service as more of a department that exists within our organization versus the fact that we are all part of service, it's all our jobs to provide service to our customers, those are the companies that thrive. Too many organizations out there, customer service is a department within the organization, not a mantra, not a way of thinking throughout the organization. And that's what holds a lot of companies back when it comes to service. And the ones that really make a difference, like Zappos is another great example, that services to them, it's the most important thing, that customer experience that they deliver. As a matter of fact, Tony Hsieh has said before, he's been quoted as saying, you know, we decided not to have a marketing budget. We wanted to put all our money into customer experience, deliver the best experience we can, and then let our customers, by word of mouth, do the marketing for us.
Right. I've actually got his book right here below me, Delivering Happiness. It's a great book.
It's a great book.
A while ago. Yeah, it was an excellent read. In fact, he's not far from where I'm at here. He's downtown Vegas.
That's right.
Yeah, so and he's doing a lot here in town too. He's trying to rebuild the whole downtown area and just make it this fun, happy-go-lucky. He's doing a good job. It's getting better. It's not the best, but it's certainly not where it used to be, and it's all thanks to him. So,
you know, one of these days, I haven't done it yet. I don't get to Vegas too often. Every once in a while, I get an opportunity to speak there. And one of these days, I want to make sure that I schedule myself an extra day. I want to go on their tour and check it out. I've heard so many great things about it.
You have to. You totally have to. It's just a great environment. It makes you feel the energy, right? It's all energy, and it just sucks you in. And it's like you're so interested to know what's going on, how they do it, because it's real life. It's in front of you. You can touch it. You're not just reading about it or hearing about it on the TV or through the radio or whatever that might be. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that. It's pretty cool.
Right.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to you a little bit as far as who you are. Talk to me about kind of what your preparation is in going into these consulting gigs and speaking gigs. You just mentioned as well, you do a lot of speaking, which I think is fascinating. How do you get ready for these types of engagements? What's your plan? What's your preparation? And talk to me a little about the routine.
So it varies from the type of speaking engagement, because here I do two different type of speaking engagements typically. So I deliver keynotes, which are typically 90 minutes or so. And then I also do a lot of facilitation, and that's just a whole different ballgame, because facilitation is it's 9 to 5 for 2 days.
Right.
So it's keeping that energy. It's also having teams work in smaller groups, work as larger groups. So it's definitely a balance there. When it comes to keynotes, one of the things that I like to do, and I learned this from John, my boss, who does such a fantastic job at delivering keynotes, is, preparedness is so important. So we make sure that we have at least one pre-event call, if not more. And we want to have all our ducks in the row. So we want to know who's in attendance. We want to know who we're tailoring this to, because we don't show up with one presentation that we do from one place to another. We tailor everything. And so if you have more managers in the room than you do frontline employees, then we'll tailor it to management. If it's a frontline type of event, then we'll tailor it to things that they can go out and deliver to your customers. So we tailor everything. So the first part of it is really getting a good understanding on who the audience is and what their takeaways are. One of the questions that we ask is, what are 3 things that you want the audience to walk away with that would make you consider this event to be a success? And then we obviously try and hit on all 3 of those things and make sure that we deliver those 3 things.
Right.
And the other thing that I think really helps me a lot in when I'm delivering a keynote is then the fact that we do personalize everything, because then I go back and I go through all the presentations that I've done in the past, and I kind of piece that new one together as a puzzle based on who the audience is and what they want to talk about, the deliverables they're looking for. I piece it together. So the other thing is, no presentation that I do is ever the same. There's always different tidbits in there, maybe some different infographics, some different statistics based on who the audience is. And the great thing about that is it keeps it interesting for me too, because it's not the same thing day in and day out. There's always something different. But the other thing is that I find very helpful is that opportunity to go through and create that tailored presentation is really helping me prepare. It's making sure that I know what the material is. I know what's coming next. I'm thinking about how I'm going to deliver it. So as I'm creating it and I know who the audience is, I may be delivering differently to a group of managers than if it were a group of owners. We'd probably be talking some different language and some different experiences. So my own real world experiences that I might share would be different based on the audience. So at that time when I'm creating the slides, I'm taking all of that into account. And that really works as my preparation.
Right.
And then, you have to be a master at your craft. So then it's making sure that I know my slides. It's making sure that I'm as prepared as I can be. I heard a great tip. I actually just read a book that I really enjoyed. It was called, I have it right here actually, The Exceptional Presenter.
Ooh.
If you haven't read it,
okay.
I thought it was really good. It's by Timothy Cagle. And there were a couple of good tips in here that I started using that I wasn't using before. So a lot of times when I'm doing something brand new, I sometimes try and time it, and maybe it's a 50 or an hour minute presentation. I'll start the stopwatch and I'll try and go through the whole thing to make sure my timing's right. And that's kind of difficult. And the tip that I took out of this book, the best tip I took was that the best thing to do is really rehearse or practice in 3-minute chunks. And get that 3 minutes down and then move on to the next 3 minutes. And that way you're really kind of mastering in small chunks, and you're gonna remember those things a little easier because they are in smaller chunks. So that was a tip that I read on a plane about 3 weeks ago, and I started using it ever since, and it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's actually a technique that I've worked with people in social and emotional intelligence as well, with chunking down big tasks. It falls under procrastination, actually. It's like, how do you deal with it? It's like, so figure out what the workload is, chunk it down into bite-sized, manageable things that you can do so that you don't feel like you have this overwhelming. And like you just said, you think you might have this 90-minute presentation and you're trying to do it all, but there you go, piece by piece by piece by piece. And it sounds like it works. Strategy's good.
And the reality is, unless you're doing it at 2 a.m, when are you going to have 90 minutes uninterrupted to go through your presentation
Right.
and rehearse it? It probably doesn't exist. So smaller chunks are really more effective from a timing standpoint as well.
So how far in advance do you guys start planning a presentation? Like, for example, you get 4 months out that you've got a speaking engagement coming up. You're going to be speaking to Oracle, their key managers. Do you start working on the presentation right away? What's the lead time on all this? Can you kind of explain that whole process to us?
Sure. And it varies based on the client as well. So there's some variances there, but typically it's at least a month out. So typically, something might be booked a few months out, but and maybe there'll be some initial conversations at that point. And you also have to, again, you have to fit within the culture of the organization that's hiring you. So if they are used to working 4 months out, then we have to fit within that. A lot of organizations are, at least from my experience, are working on logistics and all those other things about their conference, and they don't get to content until 2 months or 1 month out, because they're hiring you, so their hope is you got it covered and we'll help you tweak it, which is usually the case, obviously, with most presenters. So I have found that it's usually 4 to 6 weeks out where organizations want to really talk about, they might have a better idea of who their audience is, who their ticket buyers are, who's RSVP'd. So it helps them have a better idea of the audience as well. So that's usually the time where we start 4 to 6 weeks out and have some conversations about that audience and what they want delivered.
Interesting. So what would you say would be the number one skill that you need to have in order to be an effective public speaker?
So that's a good question. What I hear about myself is that sets me apart or makes people interested in when I'm delivering things is my demeanor and my sense of calmness. And I think that comes from confidence, right? So if I'm not confident in what's coming up on the slides behind me, I might not be able to give that same sense of demeanor that people see. So for me, it's confidence. I feel like if I know my content, if I know what I'm delivering, then I can connect with the room. I can find people that are engaged and get them more engaged.
Right.
I love to walk around a room and, kind of find people that might be not so engaged, maybe not happy that they're there, and maybe on their phones, and just, trying to get them engaged. To me, it's fun.
There's a lot of different ways to think of that one. I've actually heard several people say that when they're in a room, if there's some sort of worry or, people aren't really paying attention to them, find the one person that is dialed in on you. It's like nodding, smiling, and connect with them and make it their day. And somebody's also told me in the past that it's okay to kind of wake the room up. Like, hey, let's get you guys up here. Not in that, abrupt fashion, but, these are all things that I'm learning as well. And so to hear it from you is interesting. But confidence is very important. It allows you to be who you are, the authenticity of the speaker. And that's what people want before anything else. And it sounds like for you get that by knowing what you're doing, which is important.
Yeah, if I didn't have confidence in my material and confidence that I knew the audience and I was going to deliver something that they should feel is worthwhile,
right,
then I probably would tense up. I probably would be grasping and trying to force humor or other things. And so my goal when I speak to any group is to be me,
right,
and to be natural as possible. That took me some time to learn too, because I came into an organization, the DeJulius Group, with a very dynamic speaker. John DeJulius, if any of your viewers has seen him before, he is a ball of energy on stage.
Yeah.
That's his number one thing. People buy in because he is so passionate and so energetic, and people want to hear more from him. Well, the problem is that's not me. And so here I am coming to this organization, and you have the option to hire John to come in. And, oh, by the way, we have this guy named Dave Murray. Is he like John? Well, no, he's really not. So when I first started, I almost felt like I needed to be that, and I'm not. So I had to find myself, and John helped me a lot with that. We sat down and I presented, and he was very forthcoming with feedback on where I can improve, where I was doing well and should really hone in, and what I should avoid, get rid of, and so that helped me a lot. But at the end of the day, you have to be you. You can't be someone else.
Right.
You can't force it, because it's noticeable, and it's not going to work every time. It may work every once in a while, but it's not going to work over the long haul, and you're gonna set yourself up to be in spots where you don't know what to do because you're not being you.
Yeah. It's so funny. I have a quick story. When I first decided that I wanted to start speaking, I hired a coach, and my first homework assignment was go home and prepare or get a 3-minute speech ready. And mind you, I was terrified of public speaking. Even speaking in front of her was like terrifying to me. So I didn't really know what to do. So I came home and I started watching videos of other people. I think I was watching Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, Brendon Burchard, and I was trying to copy their pitches and their speeches. And so I did my best to remember what they said. And the next morning when I went back to her, I came in and I was basically regurgitating what they had said. And she was looking at me like, the hell?
Right.
Who'd you take that from? And I was like, how'd you know? She's like, you have no idea what you're doing. And she laid it on me. It was rough. It was probably the most disturbing feedback I got, but I was like, I just don't know what I'm doing. And that's when she's like, we need to find your voice. We need you to get to your point of departure. And that's going to be a process. And so I went home and I'm like, what's my voice? I was like, is it the physical sound? I was like, I know what my voice sounds like. It's like, no, you're going to discover it. You're going to learn it. And from there, it all came out. It's you. It's the authentic you, your story.
Right.
And that was such a magical discovery. And from there, it was like everything changed. But
yeah,
it was such a cool thing to learn. And so I want to kind of ask you a question about what you do at this point to continue to learn and make yourself better. I see you've got the book, and I want people to understand that, as a professional, you always have to keep putting yourself in a position to win and be better. And I think learning helps you do that, correct?
Absolutely. So I'm always looking for new ways to learn. One of the things that we do that is great at the DeJulius Group is whenever we present, whether it's a keynote or it's a 2-day workshop, we always have a feedback form in the back. So we always do a workbook, because we know that if we're providing attendees with the workbook, they're more likely to actively listen, to be involved. They want to fill in the workbook as they go. So that's a helpful tool that we use. And the last page is a feedback. What would you recommend for this to be better? And so feedback to me is so important. I love getting that feedback, and that's my number one source of getting better is learning what people, because one of the things that we always say at the DeJulius Group is bad companies don't hire us.
Right.
Really lousy service companies don't call up and say, hey, can you come fix us? We hear from good companies that provide really good service, but know that if they focus a little deeper, if they systematize some things, that they're really going to be able to differentiate themselves from the competition. So because of that, I get to work with great people all the time,
right.
People that are really passionate about their organizations, that work really hard. So I want their feedback. So when I go in and do a 2-day workshop with 40 people at one of our clients, I want to hear what they have to say. So that's been probably for me the most important tool. And it's tough at first, and we have our Secret Service Summit here in Cleveland, and I speak on the main stage on that as well. And so there's 750 people in attendance, and they all can fill out the feedback. And sometimes it's brutally honest. It's maybe a little more than you want to hear.
Right.
But it's so important because that's where you really learn how you can improve. Because if an audience member is saying, I wish you did this, or I wish you talked more about this, then obviously they want to hear it. So
right.
You have to deliver it.
And that's also great for getting better. But at the same time, you have to maintain control of that, though, right? Because you can't please everybody.
Right.
So that's the hard part. And I've heard some numbers, and these are some statistics that I learned in some public speaking meetups, is that 80% of the room is going to kind of be just whatever. 10% is going to really like you, and then 10% is going to dislike you.
Right.
Now, whether or not those are valid numbers, those are what I was told. But once you get to that point, you kind of just come in from a place of I'm delivering great value, and this is who I am. and like hopefully it resonates with you. But you guys seem to have it down packed to a science, and so whatever it is that you're getting back, I'm sure you're implementing in the future.
Yeah, we try to for sure. And when our clients tell us something, so it's one thing to get information from audience members, because we always want to hear what the audience members think, but we also go and really ask the person who hired us, the person who said, we want you to come in, whether they're a client of ours that we're doing a workshop, or they're the person that hired us to come in and speak to their event. We also want to make sure that that we're getting feedback from them, because sometimes they're going to be hearing things differently than we will hear things. So, sometimes someone might not bother sharing with us, but they may tell the person who they bought the ticket from. And so we want to make sure we're getting that feedback too. So I would always recommend that you get that feedback from as many sources as possible. And I just found a quote as we were talking, again, from this book that I just read, another great takeaway. It's from Samuel Johnson. I'm not sure who Samuel is. I'll have to look him up. But his quote is, "Advice is seldom welcome. Those who need it most like it least."
Yeah.
And there's another one in here that is great. It's Norman Vincent Pearl, who once said, "The trouble with most of us is that we would rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism."
Mm-hmm.
So those two quotes speak volumes to us who are up there in front of audiences, because we need that criticism to really grow and expand.
Yeah, and the issue is, in a lot of cases, the ego, and I tell people this all the time, one of the hardest things in the world to do is be honest with ourselves about ourselves. Nobody wants to know that dirt. It's like, it's self-tormenting, exactly, to be honest with you. And it's like, oh, I can't take it. And that really is what sets the exceptional people apart from the just I'm okay people.
Sure.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the numbers that you said earlier, I've heard that before as well. The 10% will really like you, 80% won't care all that much, or be indifferent, and then 10% for whatever reason just won't like you at all. Mm-hmm. To me, that really rings true, because every time I speak, there's a handful of people that come up to me and say, "That was great, love it, want to talk more." And so I see those numbers out there. I think that's a pretty true estimate of what happens.
Yeah, it's great. And so let me ask this question: What is the best investment that you've made in yourself up to this point?
That's a great question. Best investment in myself. Well, other than a couple of books that I try and make sure that I'm up to date and constantly learning when I can. And I'll be honest, I don't always have time to read. A lot of times, I have 3 kids, and I'm helping with homework. And by the time I'm done with my day, sometimes my eyes are a little too heavy to get a chapter in. So sometimes that's a struggle. That's a goal of mine to do more, quite honestly, to make that investment more in myself. So, continuing education. I love to attend conferences. I'm kind of a conference junkie. I don't get to go to many. But when I can go and learn, because I love to learn new things, number one, but I love to also, in my role, I love to watch how other people present.
Right.
I find that fascinating to see how they're sharing information, what's working for them. Not because I want to emulate or copy them, but if it's working, then maybe there's something that I could do differently on my end that could get the same result. So that's another thing that I always love to do is go to as many conferences. When I'm speaking at a conference, I really try and go see other speakers when I can, while I'm there, and try and check them out and see what they're doing and see what their content's all about, because I really find that fascinating. And then I would say the other investment in myself is a new pair of running shoes every 3 months or so, because I try to hit the road a lot and stay in pretty good shape, because I feel in my role that helps me with my confidence as well. If I feel good about myself when I'm standing up there, I feel that I can project better and do a better job. So trying to stay on it and stay active is important to me as well.
Great points. I know exactly what you mean. And so on the other side of that question, what would be the best investment that you've ever made in someone else?
Boy, that's a good question. Best investment in someone else. Well, I can take the easy way out and talk about all the things that my kids do and all the places that my money seems to go so quickly. But again, I have 3 kids and they all have these interests. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not just activities. It's not just keeping them busy. It's money well spent, because in most of their activities, they're very passionate about them and they're learning life lessons and they're continuing to grow. So for me, that's hugely important. And then the other thing is, I'd say the other investment in other people would be, it's really comes down to time, and it gets difficult. We're busy. I travel a lot. But when I'm home, I try and give as much time to my family and my wife as I can, so that, we're both growing and we're sharing ideas, and she's in a new role at her position. And so I feel if I can ever help her, I'm always happy to. So a lot of times it just comes down to time.
Right. The one resource that we can't ever get back.
Right. For sure.
And too many people I've found waste it, or just wasting time. So what can you do to maximize the productivity in your life and do more with less?
Right.
So what brings you the most fulfillment in your life today?
The most fulfillment in my life today?
Mm-hmm.
I would say I would go to family.
Yeah.
So I would say the most fulfillment I get right now is the fact that, like I mentioned, my wife is in a new role, 3 months, and she's overseeing a team, and they're the number 1 team in her department already. And I think it's because of what she brings to the table and the reason they hired her. And I can't think of anything better than seeing one of my 3 kids successful at what they love to do. Whether it's my oldest daughter who loves theater and gets up there and belts it out on stage in front of 600 people, something that I speak all the time, but I would never go up there and sing.
Right.
But man, she can go up there and do it like it's nobody's business. My middle daughter who loves to create things. She loves to sew and draw. And then my son, who's kind of a sports fanatic, who loves just go out there and make great plays. And seeing them thrive, to me, that's the most fulfilling thing. And then, personally for me, what I find most fulfilling with my job is when I'm out there working with a client, or even just speaking, and someone comes up and really gives me a heartfelt thank you, that the message really resonated with them, that it gave them a new focus, or they're going to be thinking about things differently, or sometimes it's, I'm so glad my boss heard this because it's so important for our organization. So for me, when someone takes the time to come and say, hey, the message you delivered really touched me or really made an impact, to me, that you can't beat that.
Right. And I'm sure you come from the same place like many do. If you can just affect one person and just get them on the right track, and they can come up to you, like you just said, say, thank you, you've done your job, right? I mean,
yes,
that's all you need. Just one. Start
absolutely.
With, you're doing 10, 20, 100, 750 people at the summit, and the next thing you know is you're having a tremendous life, a fabulous life at that. So amazing, man. Amazing. Keep it up. So before we finish up, I've got 2 questions for you.
Okay.
The first question is going to be, what is your definition of service?
Good one. So my definition of service is, quite honestly, being available for others and thinking of others. It's not even necessarily always putting others first. Sometimes you'll hear that in definitions, but it's just being available. It's being ready to help. It's being willing to help.
Right.
It's being attentive.
Yeah.
And knowing when you can make a difference. Maybe it's a very small difference, but it's a difference.
And that's kind of the cycle of life there. I've lived this, and I know that I think the key to happiness is progress, always moving towards and up the ladder for something, and giving or being in service or of service for somebody else. And like you said earlier, you had some quotes. I've got some quotes right here on my board as well that I wrote when I first started this journey of mine. And several, all actually related to service. The measure of your life will be in how you serviced others. Service is the rent we pay for our space on this earth. We can all be of service to others, and as a result, serve ourselves in a higher way. Provide more service than you get paid for. And then what's the last one? Give much more than you expect to receive. Actually, the last one is going to be, the purpose of life is to give service to someone else. So there you go. It's pretty big business you're in, man. You got a lot of things to deliver on, but I love it.
We do. And, you know, when you were reading those quotes, it also made me think of that great Maya Angelou quote where it's, they won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yep. Always. One of the best. One of the best. I love that we're in the same space and that we get to talk about these things. In fact, that's why I love doing this show, is because there's so much great, not even from me, I'm talking about from this end, who I interview, always have such great insight and wisdom that they can impart for our listeners, and it makes it so phenomenal. But before I let you go, I've got one last question. Always the finale, the kicker, and that is, what is your one message of inspiration?
Okay, well, I like that question. So as I process that for a minute, again, I'm going to go back to my kids, because there's a couple of things that I try and remind them of on a regular basis. But my one message to them is to be themselves and to be comfortable who they are, especially at a young age, because there's so many pressures to fit in and be a part of the it crowd or whatever it is. And I feel that my biggest message as a parent is for them to really learn from my mistakes, right? Because I lived it, and I know that, you know, all your high school friends right now that seem oh so important, you know, when you're 25 or 30, maybe you'll still talk to one of them or two of them, maybe. Right. And so, you know, I feel that just making sure that I'm spreading that message and using my past experience to help them. And again, the focus is on just being themselves, being comfortable with who they are, and being happy with what they bring.
I couldn't agree with you more. So many of the intangibles that we inherit and who we become are learned at an early age. And it sounds like you as a father, and I'm sure your wife, are both doing a phenomenal job of teaching them what's right and kind of preparing them for life outside of, you know, the boundaries of high school and middle school, where we think we know everything, we've got all the answers.
Right.
And we soon, because we find out, you know, 10 years from then, it's way different. Like you said, nothing is the same as what we expected back then. And if you're lucky, you get a few friends from college and high school that stick around. But, you know, other than that, life is much more different than those times what we expected. So,
right.
I want to acknowledge you for everything you've done, you know, in the service industry, and for the class act that you've been, and for really making a difference in people's lives, you know, across industries for 20 plus years, not just corporate companies, but also the individuals that you've worked with and that you've led. I know you're making a huge difference, my man, and I'm so glad that we've got to meet. You know, in fact, because of your kids, is how we in fact got in touch through a mutual friend, because you guys were at a sports engagement, and then a conversation got started, and, you know, here we are.
Right.
Awesome. So, you know, without you being the class act, the all-American guy that you are, I don't think that this world would be as good of a place as it is. So keep up the good work, man. And I'm glad that I've got the chance to know you and had you on here. And I'm certainly looking forward to having you in my life in the future and continuing the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to hear that. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad I got to meet you, and I'm excited about what you have ahead of you. And I'm looking forward to seeing it and being a part of it.
Yeah, you're the man. I'm going to get to Cleveland soon. We're going to go catch an Indians game, Cavs game, something. I'm going to tour the facilities, meet the staff, see what's going on over there at the Julius Group. Maybe train some more. See you in action, my friend.
We'd love to have you anytime.
Dave, you're the man. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
All right, Manny. Thank you for having me.
You got it, buddy.